Welcome to today's story, The Monotonous Mystery of Miss Penelope's Pearls, brought to life by StoryWave.ai. Don't forget to hit like, share this tale, and subscribe for daily adventures in storytelling. Chapter 1. The Hilltop Curiosity. I never fancied myself much of a sleuth, but the enigma that unfolded before my eyes that brisk morning in Hay-on-Wye would have beguiled even the most seasoned detective. The town, a haven for bibliophiles and antiquarians, was nestled in the verdant folds of the Welsh countryside, a tapestry of rolling hills and ancient woodlands. It was a place where history whispered through the cobbled streets, and the aroma of old books mingled with the scent of rain on stone. On that peculiar morning, I, Bill Trolly, set out to conquer the undulating trails that sprawled like veins across the landscape. With my trusty compass in hand and a map tucked into my jacket pocket, I embarked on a solo hike to clear my head, a ritual I found both meditative and invigorating. The sky was a canvas of soft grays, and the air held the crisp promise of a day yet untouched by the town's bustle. As I reached the crest of a particularly steep hill, something untenable in the distance caught my eye, a structure, stark and gleaming against the pastoral backdrop. I hastened my pace, curiosity piquing with each step. There, rooted in the earth as if it had always belonged, stood a metal monolith, its surface smooth and unadorned, reflecting the somber morning light. "Would you look at that?" A voice drifted from behind me. I turned to find Agatha Crispies, the town's librarian, and a fellow aficionado of the unexplained, her silver hair catching the light as she approached, magnifying glass in hand. "Morning, Augie," I greeted her, my eyes still fixed on the monolith. "Ever seen anything like it?" "Not in all my years here," she replied, her voice soft yet tinged with excitement. "And I've walked this path more times than I can count." We circled the object, exchanging theories and observations. It was a peculiar sight, no marks to indicate its origin, no clues as to why it stood sentinel on this hilltop. The townspeople would be abuzz with speculation by sunset, I was certain. As the day meandered on, I watched from a distance as the curious and the concerned alike made their pilgrimage to the hilltop. Each person's reaction was a vignette, a story in itself. Some stood in awe, others in skepticism. A few even reached out tentative hands, as if to confirm the monolith's existence through touch. By mid-afternoon, the once tranquil hilltop had transformed into a forum of debate and wonder. "I tell ya, it's aliens," I overheard one chap assert, his voice tinged with fervor. "They're sending us a message." "It's nothing but a prank, mark my words," another countered, her arms folded defiantly across her chest. I found myself drawn into the discourse, sharing my initial encounter with the monolith, reveling in the exchange of ideas and theories. It was an intoxicating blend of logic and wild conjecture, and I felt an exhilarating sense of camaraderie with my fellow townsfolk. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, the crowd thinned, leaving only a handful of us bathed in the ethereal twilight. It was then I realized that this monolith, whether an announcer of the unknown or a simple mystery, had already woven itself into the fabric of our town's story. And so, I made my way home under the watchful gaze of the monolith, pondering the day's events. Hay-on-Wye had always been a place of stories, and now, it seemed, we were on the precipice of a new tale, one that I was unwittingly a part of. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls had begun, and I, with notebook in hand, was ready to unravel its threads. Chapter 2. Monolith Whispers. It was as if the monolith had sprung from the very whispers of Hay-on-Wye, for overnight, it seemed, the entire town had been ensnared by its silent siren call. I awoke to a buzz that hummed through the streets like electricity through copper wire. Augie and I exchanged knowing glances over our morning coffee at the Buttered Scone, the local cafe that had become an impromptu hub for all monolith-related chatter. "They're saying it could be a relic from a bygone era," Augie murmured, her hazel eyes scanning the room, as if each patron held a clue to this unfolding enigma. "Or a marker for extraterrestrial explorers," I added with a smirk, recounting the more outlandish theories that had been tossed about the previous day. The cafe was abuzz with townsfolk, each conversation a thread in the town's tapestry of speculation. The air was thick with the scent of freshly baked pastries and rich coffee, a comforting blanket amidst the growing uncertainty. It wasn't long before the town crier's bell clanged through the streets, announcing an impromptu town meeting at the community hall. The townspeople flowed from the cafe in a stream of curiosity and concern, eager for some semblance of consensus. The hall, with its high ceilings and walls adorned with portraits of past mayors, was soon filled to the brim. The mayor, a stout man with a ruddy complexion and a penchant for formality, stood at the podium. His voice, though firm, couldn't hide the tremor of unease. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that this object has caused quite a stir," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "But let us not forget the pride we take in our town's harmony. We must not let this divide us." As he spoke, the doors swung open, and a figure strode in, a man seemingly plucked from the pages of an adventure novel. His attire was a canvas of khaki, complete with a hat that shadowed his keen eyes. "Professor Alastair Hargreaves, at your service," he announced in a booming voice that silenced the murmurs. His arrival was as unexpected as the monolith itself, his reputation as an eccentric academic preceding him. The mayor's welcoming smile was tinged with an unmistakable edge. "Professor, we're a simple community, not accustomed to such disruptions." "Ah, but where there is disruption, there is also discovery, Mr. Mayor," Hargreaves countered, his gaze fixed on the man behind the podium. The tension in the room was palpable, a taut string that hummed between the two men. The townspeople exchanged glances, sensing the undercurrents of a brewing storm. I found myself drawn into the fray, introducing myself to the professor as a keen observer and erstwhile custodian of the town's latest curiosity. "Ah, Bill, is it?" Hargreaves said, his handshake firm. "I've heard you were among the first to encounter our mysterious friend on the hill." "That I was," I confirmed, my mind alight with questions for the professor. "What brings you to our corner of the world?" "The pursuit of knowledge, my dear fellow," he replied, his eyes twinkling with the thrill of the hunt. "And this monolith is a puzzle that calls out to be solved." As the meeting unfolded, it was clear that the lines were drawn. Some saw the monolith as an opportunity, a chance to put Hay-on-Wye on the map. Others feared the disruption it brought, the unknown implications of its presence. The debate raged on, voices rising and falling in a crescendo of passion and fear. Through it all, Augie and I exchanged notes, our own theories evolving with each new piece of the puzzle. The monolith, once an inanimate object on a hill, had become a catalyst, a whisper that grew into a roar, echoing the deepest hopes and fears of the people of Hay-on-Wye. And as the sun set on another day, the whispers of the monolith called out, beckoning us all toward the heart of the mystery that had ensnared our tranquil town. Chapter 3, Nocturnal Notes. Moonlight cast a spectral glow upon the monolith, transforming it from a silent sentinel of the day to a torch of mystery in the night. The townspeople of Hay-on-Wye had retired to their homes, leaving the streets deserted, save for the occasional flicker of a candle through a window pane. Yet here I was, Bill Trolly, with Agatha at my side, concealed in the shadow of an ancient oak, eyes fixed on the metallic enigma that had captivated us all. "Did you see that?" Agatha's whisper cut through the stillness of the night. I strained my eyes, and there it was, a fleeting shape, a shadow that moved with purpose around the monolith. We watched in hushed anticipation as another figure joined the first, their movements deliberate, yet shrouded in the cloak of darkness. "This is no chance encounter," I murmured, my instincts as an amateur sleuth tingling. "Someone or something is orchestrating this." Agatha nodded, her magnifying glass at the ready, a symbol of her unyielding quest for answers. "Let's get closer," she suggested with a tenacity that mirrored my own. We navigated the terrain with the familiarity of those well acquainted with the Welsh countryside. As we approached, the figures vanished, as if swallowed by the night itself. What remained, however, was something neither of us had anticipated, a symbol etched into the earth, glowing faintly beneath the monolith's base. "It looks ancient, Celtic perhaps," Agatha said, her voice brimming with fascination as she knelt beside the glyph. "This is no modern-day graffiti. It's deliberate, meaningful." We pondered the symbol's significance, the night air thick with the scent of damp earth and the musky aroma of the surrounding woods. The monolith, bathed in an eerie luminescence, stood watch over our investigation, its purpose more cryptic than ever. As dawn's first light began to chase away the shadows, Agatha and I retreated to her sanctuary, the library. Surrounded by the musty scent of aged books and the subtle creak of laden shelves, Agatha delved into the town's past, her fingers dancing across the spines of history texts and local folklore. "There it is," she exclaimed, her discovery slicing through the silence. An old legend speaks of a guardian stone, a monolith said to appear in times of great change. I leaned in, captivated by the tale that wove itself from the pages. The legend spoke of a time long forgotten when a stone arose from the earth, bearing omens that would alter the course of the town's fate. Could our monolith be the guardian stone of legend? I pondered aloud, the pieces of the puzzle coalescing in my mind. "It's more than possible," Agatha replied, her voice steady with conviction. "And if it is, we need to understand why it's here now." The day brought more questions than answers, and the townspeople's unease grew with each whispered rumor and sidelong glance. The monolith had become more than a mere curiosity. It was a signal, a keeper of secrets that only the night seemed to unveil. As I lay in bed that evening, the events of the past days replayed in my mind like an unsolved riddle. The nocturnal figures, the ancient symbol, the legend of the guardian stone, all threads in a tapestry of mystery that Agatha and I were determined to unravel. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was deepening, and I knew that the answers we sought lay hidden, waiting to be discovered under the cover of night. With my tenacity strengthened, I promised myself that the next evening would bring us closer to the truth, no matter what unseen forces were at work. Chapter 4. The Monolith's Message. Dawn hadn't yet kissed the sky when an urgent knock rattled my door. Bleary-eyed and still wrapped in the tail end of sleep, I stumbled to answer it. Agatha stood there, her face flushed with the kind of fervor that comes from stumbling upon something big. "Bill, you must come at once," she implored, gripping a lantern that cast her features in a dramatic relief against the pre-dawn gloom. With a groggy nod, I threw on my jacket and followed her into the morning's embrace, which was still clinging to the last whispers of night. The town was a ghost of itself at this hour, shrouded in a thick mist that seemed to rise from the very earth, and our boots left dewy impressions on the cobblestone streets as we made our way to the heart of our intrigue, the monolith. It wasn't long before the towering figure loomed ahead of us, its metal surface gleaming even in the shy light. Agatha raised her lantern, and that's when I saw it, an inscription, not carved but somehow fused into the monolith's surface. It was as if the words had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. "Cadwshi Gorfenol, Muni de Fodol," I read aloud, the Welsh language familiar yet strange in this context. "Preserve the past for the sake of the future." Agatha's fingers traced the letters, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "But what past is it urging us to preserve?" she pondered, her tone laced with the weight of our shared curiosity. We were so engrossed in the enigma before us that we didn't notice the approach of Evan, the town historian, until he was nearly upon us. His eyes were wide, not with surprise, but recognition. "I've seen this phrase before," he said, his voice tinged with a gravity that rooted us to the spot. "It's connected to a local legend, one that many believe is just a fable. But this," he gestured to the monolith, "could change everything." Before we could delve deeper into his cryptic hint, Evan excused himself, muttering about needing to check his archives for something important. The urgency in his step spoke volumes, and Agatha and I exchanged a look that needed no words. We knew this was a significant piece of the puzzle. The rest of the town awoke to the news of the inscription like a hive disturbed, buzzing with questions and theories. But as the day wore on, a new mystery emerged. Evan had vanished, his archives left in disarray, with no sign of the historian himself. Rumors swirled, fingers pointed, and suspicion fell upon an unlikely figure, Rhys, a reclusive local artist renowned for his use of ancient symbols. Some claimed they'd seen him wandering the hills at night, others whispered of his obsession with the town's hidden history. I found myself at the doorstep of Rhys's cottage, nestled at the edge of town, like a secret. The door creaked open to reveal the artist, his eyes the color of storm clouds, his hands stained with paint. "Rhys, people are talking," I began, "about the monolith, the inscription, and Evan's disappearance." He regarded me with a silent intensity before responding. "Bill, I have my demons, but meddling with forces I don't understand isn't one of them. His words were firm, yet I sensed an undercurrent of fear. Reese was many things, but the architect of our current conundrum, that remained to be seen. As I left the artist to his solitude, the weight of the monolith's message bore down on me. Preserve the past for the sake of the future. What past was calling out for protection, and at what cost? And where in the world was Evan? The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was far from monotonous. It was a labyrinth, and with each turn, the exit seemed to grow ever more elusive. Chapter 5. Trail of Tales. The Old Town archives smelled of time itself, a pungent blend of mildew and mothballs that could suffocate the uninitiated. Yet, for Agatha and me, it was the scent of adventure, a fragrance promising hidden truths nestled within yellowed pages and forgotten files. The absence of Evan, our historian, left a void in the dusty corridors of records, but his shadow loomed large as we sifted through the secrets of Hay-on-Wye. "Look at this," Agatha beckoned, her voice a hushed tremor as she held up an aged photograph. The image was sepia-toned, frayed at the edges, capturing a group of stern-faced individuals standing before the very hill where our monolith now stood. "The founders," I read the caption aloud, a chill tracing the nape of my neck. Their eyes seemed to follow us, knowing, accusing. "Beneath their stoic exterior lies a web of feuds," Agatha continued, her slender fingers tracing the lines of their faces. "Generations of discord sown into the very soil we tread." As the morning sun filtered through the high, cobwebbed windows, we pieced together a tapestry of rivalries that had shaped our town. Land disputes, forbidden romances, and betrayals that simmered beneath the surface of Hay-on-Wye's quaint charm. Our search led us to a leather-bound ledger, its lock rusted but unyielding. Agatha's deft hands coaxed it open, revealing a list of names, many of which still echoed in the town's lore. But one entry stood out, a name accompanied by a cryptic symbol, a circle entwined with a serpent. The Ouroboros, I identified, the symbol igniting a memory of whispered stories from my youth. It's associated with alchemy and eternal cycles. But here it seems to signify membership to something clandestine. Our eyes met, a silent agreement passing between us. This was no mere historical society. This was a secret fraternity whose influence may well have extended to our present conundrum. As dusk approached, we found ourselves once again atop the hill, the monolith watching over us like a silent guardian. A cool breeze whispered through the grass, carrying with it the faintest hint of a melody. Or was it a lament? That's when I saw it. Agatha's voice broke through my reverie. "The ground over there, by the base, it's been disturbed recently." We approached the spot she indicated, and sure enough, there was a patch of earth that differed from its surroundings, a mosaic of stones that suggested a deliberate design. With hands and tools borrowed from the archive's maintenance closet, we dug. The soil gave way to reveal a narrow opening, the mouth of a tunnel leading into darkness. The air that rose from within was cool and musty, a telltale sign of long secluded spaces. "We need to explore this," I said, my voice barely concealing the thrill of our discovery. "But we need to be cautious. If this is connected to the secret society, we could be stepping into peril." Agatha nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "Then let's prepare. We have a long night ahead of us." The monolith's message had led us to a trail of tales, each more convoluted than the last. As the moon cast its pale glow over Hay-on-Wye, the town slumbered, unaware that beneath their homes and streets lay a labyrinth of the past, a hidden history that Agatha and I were determined to navigate. And so we descended, the cool walls of the tunnel embracing us as we ventured into the unknown, the monolith's silent message echoing in our hearts: preserve the past for the sake of the future. But what past were we about to unearth? And what future were we destined to shape? Chapter 6. Echoes of the Past. The morning dew clung to the grass as if the earth itself was trying to hold back the day, but the sun was persistent, casting its light on a town gripped by ancient secrets. Hay-on-Wye was abuzz with the annual book fair, yet this year the stalls brimming with dusty tomes and leather-bound volumes were overshadowed by the inscrutable metal sentinel on the hill. Aggie and I made our way through the throngs of bibliophiles and history enthusiasts, our conversation a low hum amid the bustle of fervent haggling and the rustle of turning pages. Today, we were meeting with a man heralded as a leading expert in druidic lore, a scholar who claimed that the roots of our monolith stretched back to the time of the ancient Druids. As we approached his tent, the Druidic expert, a man named Gwillem, with a beard as wild as the Welsh hills and eyes that seemed to pierce through the veils of time, greeted us with a nod. "Bill, Augie, I've been expecting you," Gwillem said, his voice rich with the musical lilt of the land. "The monolith has spoken to those with ears to hear." We exchanged introductions, and without further ado, Gwillem began to weave a tale of the Druids who once walked these lands, their connection to the earth, and their sacred rituals that honored the cycles of nature. "It's no coincidence that the monolith stands upon the hill," Gwillem asserted, his hands tracing patterns in the air as if he was sketching the unseen connections. "It's an anchor, a point where the veil between worlds grows thin. The Druids knew this." His words hung between us, an offering of wisdom that seemed at once fantastical and yet, in the context of our current mystery, entirely plausible. As the day waned, we were invited to witness a gathering of modern Druids, cloaked figures who moved with reverence towards the base of the monolith's hill. Their chants rose into the evening sky, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the very heartbeat of the earth. We watched, hidden by the embrace of an elder oak, as the Druids circled a great fire, their shadows dancing with the flames. The ritual was mesmerizing, the air electric with something ancient and powerful. Augie leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think they're onto something, Bill? Could their ancestors have placed the monolith here?" I pondered her question, my gaze fixed on the ritual's hypnotic ebb and flow. "Maybe," I replied, "or perhaps they, like us, are drawn to its mystery, seeking answers from a time when the language of the earth was known to all." The night grew darker, and the Druids' ritual came to a close, their figures melting away into the night as if they were never there. Augie and I lingered, the fire's glow dimming, the monolith's shadow stretching across the land like a dark finger pointing to the unknown. As we made our way back to the book fair's remnants, a voice stopped us in our tracks. "You're searching for answers in the wrong places," a book fair attendee said, clutching a worn volume to his chest. His eyes gleamed with the certainty of one who believes they hold the key to a great puzzle. "And where might we find the right places?" Augie inquired, her interest piqued by his bold claim. "The monolith isn't just a druidic stone or a historian's riddle," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's a lock, and I know what it's keeping safe." His words ignited a flurry of questions, but he simply smiled, tapped the side of his nose, and disappeared into the dispersing crowd, leaving us with a new thread to pull in the tapestry of our town's mystery. The echoes of the past reverberated through the night, and I lay in bed, the day's revelations swirling in my mind. The monolith's message was more than a whisper from history. It was a shout that had carried through the ages, and now we were closer than ever to deciphering its secrets. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was anything but, and I knew that our journey was far from over. Chapter 7. Gathering Shadows. It was a day cloaked in the ordinary, the kind where sunlight plays on cobblestones and shopkeepers sweep their doorsteps. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, the town of Hay-on-Wye thrummed with a tension as taut as a bowstring. I, Bill, had noticed a new face among the market stalls, a man whose sharp eyes scanned more than the goods on display. Augie joined me at the cafe, her usual spot by the window, now serving as our watchpost. "That's him, isn't it?" she said, nodding subtly toward the newcomer. "The one they're calling the collector?" I followed her gaze to the man in question. He was dressed in a coat that was too heavy for the season, with a hat pulled low over his brow. His presence was an itch I couldn't scratch, a feeling that had nothing to do with the warm coffee in my hand. "Seems he's got more than a passing interest in our monolith," I observed, noting the way his eyes flickered to the hill beyond the town with each interaction he had. We watched, sipping our drinks, as the collector engaged in a hushed conversation with a local we knew only as Shifty Pete, a man whose dealings were often whispered about but never proven. The exchange between them was brief, their handshake lingering just a moment too long. "Something's not sitting right with me," Augie said, closing her notebook with a decisive snap. "What's a black market antiquities dealer doing in Hay-on-Wye? Besides stirring up trouble, you mean?" I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. The rumor of a second monolith, one that mirrored our own, had spread through town like wildfire, igniting imaginations and fears alike. Some claimed it was the key to unlocking the mystery, others that it was an announcer of doom. Two monoliths, Augie mused, tapping her chin. If it's true, what's the connection? And why is our friend so eager to get his hands on it? Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. We rushed to see a group of townsfolk gathered around a poster that had appeared overnight, depicting an ancient stone similar to our monolith, but with markings that were decidedly different. Could this be the second monolith? I wondered aloud, the crowd buzzing with speculation and concern. That's what he wants you to think, a voice said from behind us. We turned to find Rhys, the reclusive artist, his usually solitary figure now amidst the throng. But trust me, the real thing is far more interesting than that sketch. Augie and I shared a glance. Rhys had been a suspect in our minds once, but now he seemed just as caught up in the mystery as the rest of us. The collector's tales are as dark as the shadows he gathers, Rhys continued, his eyes narrowing. He's searching for something, and it's not just a piece of stone. The day faded into evening, and Augie and I found ourselves back on the hill, the monolith standing silent against the twilight sky. We were no closer to understanding its purpose, but with every new player that entered the game, the stakes seemed to rise. Bill, Augie said, her voice low, we're being watched. I didn't need to look to know she was right. The collector's silhouette was barely discernible in the growing darkness, but his interest in us was as clear as day. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was unfolding into a tapestry of deceit and intrigue, with each thread leading to more questions than answers. And as the shadows gathered around us, I knew that Augie and I were standing on the precipice of a revelation that would shake the foundations of Hay-on-Wye. The game was afoot, and it was time to play our part. Chapter 8, A Book Fair Clue. The morning mist clung to the streets of Hay-on-Wye like a shroud, and the usually vibrant sounds of the bustling book fair seemed muffled, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Today, the fair was more than a gathering of literary enthusiasts. It was the backdrop of our latest lead in the monolith mystery. Augie and I navigated the maze of stalls, each crowded with stacks of books that towered like the skyscrapers of knowledge they were. We were in search of one tome in particular, a rare volume said to contain the same cryptic symbol that adorned our monolith. The seller, a reedy man named Finch, was rumored to possess such a book, but as we arrived at his usual spot, we found only an empty table and a scattering of loose pages caught in the morning breeze. He was here just a moment ago, a neighboring stall owner said, her voice tinged with concern. Packed up in a hurry, he did, like the devil himself was on his heels. Augie's eyes narrowed as she picked up one of the pages. This is from the book we need, she said, her finger running over the text. We have to find Finch, and fast. Our search became a frantic dash through the fair, our calls for the missing seller echoing unanswered. The crowd was a living entity, a sea of bodies that ebbed and flowed around the countless stalls. It was amidst this chaos that a familiar face found me. Bill, called a voice that cut through the din, a voice from a chapter of my life I had thought closed. It was Helen, an old friend whose path had once run parallel to mine before diverging sharply. Helen, what are you doing here? I asked, surprised at her sudden appearance. I heard about your monolith, she said, her eyes reflecting a seriousness that matched the gravity of her words. I have something that may help. From her bag, she retrieved an old photograph, its edges worn with time. It depicted the hill, and there, in the background, was a structure unmistakably similar to our monolith, yet different, marked with symbols that were not present on ours. This was taken decades ago, Helen explained. There's more at play here than just local legend. The revelation was a jolt, sending my thoughts racing. Could there have been another monolith all along? What did it mean for our investigation? We were contemplating this when a scrap of Finch's coat, caught on a bramble, offered a silent clue to his hasty retreat. The trail led away from the fair, toward the outskirts of the town, where the rolling hills whispered secrets of their own. As we followed, the fair's bustle faded into the background, replaced by the sound of our own footsteps and the rustling leaves that lined our path. The chase was on, and with it, the feeling that we were closing in on a truth that had evaded us since the monolith's confusing arrival. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was proving to be anything but, with each chapter in our search revealing layers of complexity that defied simple explanation. And as Helen rejoined our quest, bringing with her pieces of the past that shone new light on our enigma, I knew that the answers we sought were drawing ever nearer, hidden within the pages of a rare book that held secrets not meant for just any reader. Chapter 9. Under a Waning Moon. The night fell over Hay-on-Wye like a velvet curtain, and the moon, a slender crescent, cast a silver glow on the monolith that stood defiant against the darkened sky. The town, usually a torch of tranquility, was abuzz with whispers of the oddities that had begun to unfold since the lunar spectacle declared its presence. Bill Trolly, that's me, and Agatha found ourselves at the epicenter of these strange happenings, standing by the monolith, our eyes tracing its silhouette as it basked in the moon's eerie light. "Have you noticed the birds?" Agatha asked, her gaze never leaving the monolith. "They've been restless all evening, fluttering about like they've lost their senses." I nodded, recalling the turmoil of caws and chirps that had filled the air, a distinct separation to the usual nighttime serenity. "And the Roberts dog, barking at shadows that aren't there," I added, pondering the disturbance in the natural order. We weren't the only ones to observe the peculiar behavior. Townsfolk reported cats hissing at empty spaces, foxes circling the town's edge, and owls perched atop rooftops, staring down at the streets with unblinking eyes. "It's as if they're reacting to something we can't see," Agatha said, her brows furrowed in thought. Something brought on by that slim crescent in the sky. Our conversation was cut short by a sudden flicker of lights from the nearby houses. One by one, the street lamps dimmed, then surged with a brightness that was almost blinding, before extinguishing altogether, plunging us into darkness. "Power fluctuations this severe aren't normal," I observed, my voice steady despite the unease that clawed at my chest. "The timing is too coincidental." We made our way toward the heart of the town, guided by the soft luminescence of the monolith behind us. The electronic disturbances had set off car alarms, caused televisions to switch on of their own accord, and filled the airwaves with static. As we reached the town square, a crowd had gathered around the mayor, who was slumped on a bench, his face ashen and drawn. "He just collapsed," someone in the crowd said, their voice a mix of concern and confusion. One moment he was fine, the next. Agatha and I exchanged a glance. The mayor had been the monolith's staunchest skeptic, dismissing the town's growing fears as superstition. Yet here he was, struck down by an invisible hand that seemed to be connected to the very thing he denied. The night wore on, the waning moon watching over us as we navigated the labyrinth of incidents that had sprung up like weeds. Each occurrence was a thread, and as they multiplied, the tapestry they wove became more intricate and unnerving. "We're missing something," Agatha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A piece of the puzzle that's staring us right in the face." I couldn't help but agree. The monolith, the animals, the power surges, and the mayor's sudden illness, they were pieces of a larger design, a riddle that was becoming more complex with each passing hour. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was deepening, its edges darkening with each unanswered question. The town of Hay-on-Wye, once a haven of peace and history, was now a stage for something far beyond our understanding, a play in which we were unwitting actors, and the script was written in the stars. Chapter 10. Cryptic Confrontations. The town hall of Hay-on-Wye, usually a navigation light of local governance and communal decisions, was now a cauldron of contention, its stone walls echoing with the clamor of raised voices. As Bill, I found myself amidst this tumult, standing shoulder to shoulder with Agatha, her magnifying glass a glinting testament to the scrutiny we were under. "You can't possibly believe this monolith is anything but trouble." Mrs. Pritchard, the baker, accused, her flour-dusted apron a striking opposition to the severity in her eyes. "It's not about belief, it's about evidence," Agatha retorted, her voice steady despite the uproar. "And all we've found points to a significance beyond your narrow view." The crowd was a mosaic of townsfolk, from the barkeep, whose usual jolly demeanor was replaced by a scowl, to the librarian, whose spectacles perched on the brink of her nose as she squinted at the agitated assembly. Silence! The mayor's voice cut through the discord, yet his usual authoritative bellow was now a strained gasp. He leaned heavily on the podium, his visage pale and drawn, a stark reminder of his recent affliction. "Mayor, what's happened to you?" The concern in my voice was genuine, as the once robust figure of authority now seemed a mere shade of his former self. "I've seen the truth," he whispered, the admission sending a hush through the crowd. "There are forces at play here that we don't understand." Before more could be said, the doors burst open, and in strode Rhys, his typically reclusive nature cast aside. In his hands, he held an object that drew every eye, a dagger, its blade corroded by time, yet the hilt bore an unmistakable resemblance to the symbol on our monolith. "This was buried at the foot of the hill," Rhys announced, his voice resonating in the sudden stillness. "What does it mean, Bill?" All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of the town's gaze. "It's another piece," I said, feeling the puzzle stretch out before us. "Another link to our history." Murmurs filled the room as alliances shifted like sandbanks under a turning tide. Accusations that once flew like arrows were now held at bay, the presence of the ancient weapon a sobering reminder of the gravity of our situation. The meeting adjourned with more questions than answers, the townspeople dispersing like leaves in the wind. Agatha and I lingered, discussing our next move, when an envelope, stark white against the aged wood of the hall's floor, caught my eye. I picked it up, breaking the wax seal to reveal a message written in a hurried scrawl. "Midnight at the monolith," it read. "The truth will be revealed." "We have to go," I said to Agatha, the words both an invitation and a challenge. As night enveloped Hay-on-Wye, the moon a silent sentinel above, Agatha and I made our way to the hill. The whisper of the grass beneath our feet was a hushed prelude to the night's clandestine gathering. We arrived to find shadows moving around the monolith, their forms indistinct, their purpose unclear. We melded into the darkness, our presence unnoticed, as the figures began to chant in a language that seemed as old as the hills themselves. The monolith loomed above us, its surface catching the moonlight in strange patterns. I could not shake the feeling that it was watching, waiting for the right moment to unveil its secrets. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was reaching its zenith, the night air charged with anticipation. Hidden alliances, ancient artifacts, and whispered truths all converged under the watchful eye of the monolith. And as the chanting grew louder, I knew that the revelations of this night would change Hay-on-Wye forever. Chapter 11. The Artist's Alibi. The morning mist hung over Hay-on-Wye like a shroud, shrouding the town in a veil of mystery as thick as the one surrounding our monolith. In the heart of this quaint bookish town, the day began with the promise of revelations, as Rhys, the artist who had become as much a part of this puzzle as the monolith itself, stepped forward to clear the fog of suspicion that had clung to him. I met him at his cottage, a peculiar, ivy-draped abode that seemed to be one with the earth itself. Rhys, with hair as wild as the brambles that surrounded his home, ushered me inside, where every wall was adorned with canvases that captured the equivocal beauty of our Welsh landscapes. "Bill," Rhys began, his voice a resonant baritone that filled the room with an earnest timbre. "I know what they've been saying about me in town, but I've got an alibi that flips the script on this entire affair." I listened intently as he recounted his whereabouts, corroborated by a member of the Historical Society, a society that, unbeknownst to many, had counted Rhys among its ranks. His connection to this group, which had long prided itself on preserving the town's rich past, cast a new light on his nocturnal wanderings that had so intrigued the townsfolk. As Rhys spoke, his tale wove a vivid tapestry of clandestine meetings and earnest discussions on local lore, a far cry from the whispers of underhand dealings that had followed him like a shadow. "Our purpose has always been to protect the legacy of Hay-on-Wye," Rhys affirmed, his gaze unwavering. "And now, with the monolith's arrival, our mission has only grown in urgency." I could see the conviction burning in his eyes, a flame that was mirrored by the passion of his words. It was a turning point, one that saw old theories unraveling like threads pulled from a well-worn tapestry, while others knotted tighter, reinforcing the fabric of our investigation. Our meeting was interrupted by a frantic call from Agatha. "Bill, the library has been broken into," she said, the distress clear in her voice. I excused myself from Riss and hurried to the library, the hub of Agatha's world and a cornerstone of our community. The sight that greeted me was one of chaos, books strewn across the floor, shelves emptied in haste, and the unmistakable void where once stood the archives that Evan, our missing historian, had so meticulously maintained. Amid the wreckage, Agatha stood, her usual composure replaced by a palpable tension. "They knew exactly what they were after," she said, her hands sifting through the disarray. "Someone is trying to rewrite our history." As we took stock of the damage, a shadow detached itself from the doorway. It was Finch, the bookseller whose disappearance had set us on a frenzied chase through the book fair. His appearance was haggard, the lines on his face etched deep by worry. "Agatha," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as if fearing unseen pursuers. "I've come to warn you. The monolith, it's more than a relic. It's a key, and they'll stop at nothing to use it." His words hung heavy in the air, a portent of dangers yet unseen. Finch refused to say more. His warning delivered, he melted back into the town's labyrinthine streets, leaving us with a chilling sense of foreboding. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls was far from monotonous, indeed. It was a complex weave of history and secrets, of allegiances both overt and obscured. And as the day waned, the pieces of our puzzle lay scattered before us, each demanding to be fitted into a larger picture that was only just beginning to take shape. Chapter 12. Monolith's Might. The morning sun crested the verdant hills of Hay-on-Wye, casting its warm glow over the town as if to remind us of the day's simmering potential. I, Bill, stood at the foot of the monolith, its cool metal surface a silent testament to the turmoil that had gripped our small community. Today, the air was charged with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm or a battle, and in the hearts of the townspeople, it was clear we faced both. By my side, Agatha's presence was as reassuring as the weight of the old leather-bound diaries in her satchel. Her keen mind had pieced together a tapestry of clues that now, at last, formed a clear picture. "It's a conduit," she said, her voice resolute, "a channel for something greater than we've imagined." The collector, a figure as dark and looming as the clouds that now began to gather overhead, had made his intentions clear. His obsession with the monolith had morphed into a possessive need that threatened to tear the fabric of our town asunder. The townsfolk, a tapestry of characters, each more colorful and steadfast than the last, had come to form a barrier of bodies around the monolith. There was Reese, his hands flecked with paint that told of long nights spent capturing the soul of our landscape. Helen, whose wisdom had become a marker in our search for truth. And even Shifty Pete, whose usual self-serving antics had given way to a surprising display of community spirit. "We won't let you take it," Helen declared, her stance as unyielding as the ancient oak that stood sentinel at the town's edge. The collector's laugh was a harsh sound that seemed to scrape against the peace of the morning. "You think you can stop me?" he challenged, his eyes glinting with a feverish intensity. "This monolith is not yours to keep. It's power, and power is meant to be seized." As words turned to shoves and the crowd pressed closer, a thunderous crack split the air. The earth trembled beneath our feet, and the monolith quivered as if awakening from a long slumber. From its base, the ground gave way, revealing a hidden chamber that yawned open like the mouth of some ancient beast. "It's hollow," Agatha breathed, her magnifying glass now forgotten in the face of this new revelation. The collector made a move, his body a coiled spring set to unleash upon the monolith's secrets. But the townsfolk rallied, a human chain of determination and resolve, their voices rising in a chorus that echoed off the stone walls of Hay-on-Wye's historic buildings. "You may take our silence for weakness," Riss called out, "but we are the keepers of this land's legacy, and we will not be moved." It was a standoff that held the weight of centuries, a battle not of swords but of wills, where the prize was the soul of a town and the truth of a monument that had become its heart. In that moment, the monolith's true might was revealed, not in its physical form, but in the unity it had fostered among the people it towered over. It was our history, our heritage, and in the face of avarice and ambition, we stood as one. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls had reached its climax, but it was clear now that the monolith was no mere curio. It was a symbol of our collective strength, a tribute to the ties that bound us to each other and to the land we called home. Chapter 13, Culmination of Clues and Conclusions. A hush fell over Hay-on-Wye as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a golden sheen on the ancient monolith that stood at the heart of so many of our town's whispers. The air was crisp, laden with the scent of dew-soaked grass and the promise of revelations that the day was poised to unfurl. I, Bill, made my way to Agatha's abode, the quaint, ivy-draped cottage that housed more secrets in its walls than the entire local archives. She greeted me at the door, her silver hair reflecting the morning light, her eyes alight with a focus that could cut through steel. "Morning, Bill," she said, her voice steady. "I've been up all night pondering over the symbols we found in the chamber beneath the monolith. They're not just random carvings, they're a message." Her living room was a maelstrom of papers and artifacts, the coffee table groaning under the weight of ancient tomes and maps that sprawled across its surface like a cartographer's dream. She pointed to an open book, the pages yellowed with age, depicting a similar monolith adorned with symbols that mirrored those we had discovered. "We're on the brink of a breakthrough," I said, the gravity of our quest settling in my bones. Agatha nodded, pouring 2 cups of tea from a pot that seemed as old as time. "These symbols speak of a guardianship, a pact made with the land itself. The monolith is more than a landmark. It's a keystone in that pact." We sat, the steam from our cups weaving into the morning air as we discussed our plan. The town was stirring, the echoes of yesterday's confrontations still hanging over the cobblestone streets like a specter. It was then that Helen arrived, her face etched with concern and purpose. "I've been doing some digging of my own," she said, a sheaf of papers tucked under her arm. "The collector, he's after the monolith for a reason we hadn't considered." Agatha and I exchanged a glance, the pieces of this baffling puzzle shifting into place with Helen's words. "He believes the monolith is a key," Helen continued, "a key to harnessing the land's energy, something our ancestors vowed to protect." The revelation sent a shiver down my spine, the implications far-reaching and fraught with peril. "Then we must act," I declared, my will hardening like the ancient stones that formed the foundation of our beloved town. The day pressed on, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out like the hands of time itself. We convened with Riss, Shifty Pete, and the others, our motley crew now the guardians of a legacy that spanned centuries. The library's break-in had been a desperate act, but it had also been a catalyst, uniting us with a shared purpose. The collector's machinations, his relentless pursuit, had only served to strengthen our bond. "We stand together," Riss said, his voice a clarion call. "For Hay-on-Wye, for the monolith, for the truth." The town square became a gathering place, a forum where ideas and plans were exchanged with the fervor of those who knew the weight of their charge. The monolith, once an inscrutable enigma, had become the rallying cry for our collective spirit. As dusk approached, we made our way to the hill, the monolith standing like a sentinel, its surface aglow with the last light of day. The collector was there, his figure dark against the twilight, but he was not alone. The townsfolk encircled him, our presence a bulwark against his ambition. "Your pursuit ends here," Agatha proclaimed, her voice echoing off the hillside. "The monolith is not yours to claim." A tension-filled silence enveloped us, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the gentle evening breeze. The collector's eyes were hard, but in them I saw the dawning realization that he was outnumbered, outmatched by the will of a town united. The monolith's might was not in its stone or the secrets it held, but in the hearts of those who had come to its defense. And as the stars began to prick the night sky, it was clear that the culmination of clues and conclusions had led us to this moment, where the true power of Hay-on-Wye was not hidden beneath the earth, but standing firmly upon it. Chapter 14, Mystery's Aftermath. In the wake of our town's collective ordeal, Hay-on-Wye settled into a rhythm that felt almost like before, except that each step, each glance towards the monolith standing tall on the hill, was a reminder of the bond that now pulsed through the heart of our community. The metal giant, once an enigma that divided, had become a illuminator that united. I found myself walking its perimeter, the morning sun casting long shadows on the grass. It was here I encountered Evan, the once missing historian, his eyes reflecting the deep green of the surrounding landscape. "Morning, Bill," he greeted me, his voice carrying a tinge of the recent events we'd all been through. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" I nodded, my gaze lingering on the monolith. "It does, like we're part of something bigger than ourselves." Evan chuckled softly, the sound carrying a weight of understanding. "This town's always been about more than just the people in it. It's the history, the stories, the land." Our conversation was interrupted as the druids, clad in their ceremonial robes that echoed the hues of the earth, began their procession towards the monolith. The town had come to accept their presence, their rituals no longer a curiosity, but a cherished tradition that seemed to weave the past with the present. Agatha joined us, her notebook brimming with scribbles of our recent adventures. "They're giving their blessing," she said, nodding towards the druids. "A way to honor the monolith's significance, not just to them, but to all of Hay-on-Wye." The ritual was a quiet affair, the chanting druids encircling the monolith, their voices a soft murmur that was carried away by the gentle breeze. It felt like the closing of a chapter, a final note in a long symphony that had played through the streets of our town. As the last of the druid's words dissipated into the air, Agatha turned to me, her eyes alight with the spark of curiosity that was her lifeblood. "So, Bill, what's next for us? Surely this can't be the end of our sleuthing." I considered her question, feeling the pull of the unknown tugging at the edges of my mind. "There's always another mystery, Aji. This town's full of them." We walked back towards the heart of Hay-on-Wye, the cobblestone streets now familiar beneath our feet. The townsfolk greeted us with nods and smiles, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we'd all undertaken. As we passed the buttered scone, Mrs. Pritchard waved us over, her hands dusted with flour as always. "You two," she said with a grin, always chasing after the next puzzle. "Sit down, have a scone on the house." We accepted her offer, the warm pastries a comfort as we nestled into the familiar surroundings of the cafe. The conversations around us were of the everyday sort, crops, weather, the latest gossip, but there was an undercurrent of pride, a shared experience that connected each person in the room. The monolith's mystery had become part of our town's tapestry, a story to be told and retold, its meanings pondered by generations to come. And as Agatha and I sat there, planning our next foray into the unknown, I realized that the true aftermath of our mystery was the knowledge that, no matter what lay ahead, we faced it together, as a town united by history's deep roots and the strength of our camaraderie. The monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls had reached its conclusion, but the echoes of its lessons would resonate in Hay-on-Wye for many moons to come. And for me, Bill, and my ever-curious companion, Agatha, there would always be another adventure just around the bend, waiting to be unraveled. The curtain falls on our current tale. Gratitude for being part of the monotonous mystery of Miss Penelope's pearls with us. Trust in StoryWave AI to transform your creative prompts into compelling stories. Show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Daily stories await to whisk you away. March 2024. Goodbye for now.